Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first of a series of videos that look like are going to take place. I am here in my home office, and you can't see very much of it, which is probably good because it's sort of a mess. Now, most of you probably don't know, but I've been fighting laryngitis for close to 3 weeks. So I teach pretty much straight through from 5 until 10, 2 days a week. And that doesn't sound like a lot until you realize that literally I'm talking for 5 hours straight. And I also have a day job, as they say, working in the Center for Community Engagement. So I talk quite a bit. I hope you can understand what I'm saying. I'm hoping to have my voice back at full force sometime next week because I'm actually supposed to be on air next week for KRBK Channel 5. And so I attempt to preserve my voice, but as you can see, it has not worked. So that's my greeting to you today. And I'm supposed to talk to you about several things. We're going to have a series of small videos rather than one large video because the format that I had been using for large videos at a time was not working. So what we're going to do is use a different program and load these up on YouTube and keep them shorter. And that way, even though you have more videos, you still will get the content in a very organized fashion. So for this one, let's talk about the definition of rhetoric. You all had a fantastic discussion on the boards about the definition of rhetoric. And I think you came to the conclusion that most of the time we come to, which is there a definition for rhetoric? And if so, what does it look like? Is it defining a container in which things occur? Is it defining a way of thinking? Is it defining a way of knowing? Is it defining a methodology for figuring out something? Or is it simply a word that is describing other words, either eloquent or empty and flowery or meaningful and civic in nature? And the answer to the question, what is rhetoric, is always a trick answer. The answer is the definition of rhetoric exists within the context in which it appears. And the reason why I say that is because you will find that the definition of rhetoric changes over time, and that it changes depending on the context, particularly the historical context. So rhetoric is defined by its circumstances and its environment. This becomes a very fluid way of looking at rhetoric so that you don't have to pin yourself down to one idea of what rhetoric is, but instead can allow it to change and morph over time. And this class is based on a chronology, and so viewing rhetoric in these different contexts will be useful. That said, I liked a lot of your definitions and what you came up with. Natalie Melton will tell you that I do always go back to the Aristotelian definition, the art or skill of knowing in any particular situation, all the means of persuasion. It encompasses three things that I think are important. First, that rhetoric is, in fact, a skill or an art that includes knowledge. So it's the knowledge, it's the way we come about knowing. It's an ontology. And to say that you know all the means of persuasion does not suggest that you're able to persuade with all of those means at one given time, but instead that you're able to identify them. And when Aristotle says in any particular instance, he is attempting to show that while the rhetorical situation changes at any given time, the rhetorician knows how it adapts or how it changes so that a message can adapt. Most of you are very familiar with the 7-part communication model that we talk about: the sender, message channel, receiver, feedback, the noise or the interruption, and the rhetorical situation. In there, there's encoding and decoding that occurs. Knowing how all of that functions and knowing the power relationships that exist and are created by language and by the situation impacts whether or not a message is in fact influential. When we talk about persuasion, we assume that we mean that I'm going to get these people to do something or think a particular way. But when we think about it in terms of influence, what we really think of is that we in some way have impacted the thinking processes of our audience. And for me, that's where the power of rhetoric lies. So we will find very different views of rhetoric, and we're going to begin that exploration with, I believe, Plato.